Who's right on AB5 and Prop 22? Will it spill over into other states? We're going to talk about it. Welcome everyone, I'm Mark. This is Mark's Travel Time. If you're new to the channel, I'm going to ask that you click my face in the corner to subscribe. Don't forget to ring that bell icon. That way you'll know when I post new videos. Let's face it, AB5 and Prop 22 boil down to benefits. Do we trust the company, Uber or Lyft, to give us benefits? Or do we trust the government to force their hand? How about if we trust ourselves? This video is sponsored by Culver, and this is one opportunity, one way for you to take control. For a modest investment, yeah, I said investment, we buy cameras, we buy water and candy and all kinds of different things. How about if we invest in ourselves? That way we can get legal advice, medical advice. We can even have a good chunk of our income paid when we can't drive. I think you should look into it. Click my link down below to get started. Okay, in this video we are going to look at Prop 22, but what I'm really going to be doing is analyzing the analysts. I think this is really interesting. I don't know if we'll get through everything in this video. If not, it might spill over into part 2. This comes to us from marketwatch.com. You can find it yourself. The article is titled, How Uber and Lyft's Business Model Could Be Changed on Election Day. And I am really going to jump around here because there's so much to comment on. We're going to start with a quote by William Gould, Professor Emeritus at Stanford Law School. But listen to this. Former chairman of the National Labor Relations Board, always look at the source because that's where the opinion is going to be skewed. What happens here is terribly important to many states which are considering such legislation. Okay, we talked about this before. Supposedly, he's trying to add weight to his argument by saying, well, look at this. It's not just me. It's not even just California. It's all these other states. They never say is what other states. Such legislation. That's a quote. Such legislation. What does that mean? Identical? Similar? They're just considering some legislation? What states? I don't know what states. And I think when people make vague comments like that to try to support their case, it's a straw man argument. If you can't support your case, you start looking for other people that might be supporting it, and supposedly that's supposed to make me say, oh yeah, that makes sense now? That doesn't mean anything. He also added, could be nationwide because former Vice President Joe Biden expressed opposition for Prop 22. So what? So what? First of all, the guy might not even get elected. Even if he does, doesn't mean he's going to do anything. And if he does move on, it doesn't mean that there's going to be any support for it. You got to look at some of these academics and wonder where are their heads at. So let's go to a source that really does have impact in this, agree or disagree. Dastardly Dara Khosrowshahi said, drivers could lose their ability to work if they have to be considered employees. He added that as an employer, Uber would be forced to actively manage drivers' schedules, hiring a specific number of employees based on a baseline volume of consistent business. That's saying a lot. What it's basically saying is supply and demand. We can't provide more drivers than the demand calls for. And some of you might say, well, that's what they're doing right now. Yeah, they're doing that right now because it doesn't matter how many drivers they put out there. When they're paying for it, they're going to have to limit how many drivers are on the road. Now, in response to that, UC Berkeley professor Catherine Fisk, who teaches labor and employment law, said, there's nothing in the law that requires workers to work a fixed shift. That is like saying the earth is flat. Oh, Catherine, I'll tell you, I think I could step in and teach at Berkeley. So, no, there's nothing in the law that requires it, but is certainly an option. Not only that, but listen to what Khosrowshahi actually said. Uber be forced to actively manage drivers' schedules. That's what he said. He didn't say it's going to require them to work fixed shift, although that could be an option. Absolutely. That is an option. It's one that I would be very worried about. It's one of the reasons I think AB5 is bad law. But what are other things they might do? They could just manage how many people are getting on the app at any given time, right? Once it hits 10,000 people in a specific region, they could shut the app down to anyone jumping in new. They do similar to that in New York, right? They limit how many people can be on the app. So that's one way that they could actively manage your schedules. Another way they could do this is by making sure that everybody is part-time. You know, that's interesting, which leads to Michael Reich. We've heard about Michael Reich, another genius at Berkeley, professor of economics. And he did the Seattle driver wage study. Remember, I commented on that because I thought, what would the good people of Seattle think if they knew someone was taking their money and giving it to another state to do a study? Because Seattle doesn't have enough smart people there that can do studies. It's just crazy the way people do things. So what did he say? He also did a similar study of New York drivers. Both studies found that about half the drivers worked for more than one app. Okay, stick with me on this. The companies could hire some of the workers, this is his quote, companies could hire some of their workers on a part-time basis, as most companies do, and they can schedule short-time shifts in advance, as many delivery companies do. I don't understand the companies' claim that this would not be possible. They didn't claim it couldn't, but listen, you are defeating your own argument, Michael. What you're saying is there's not going to be any full-time drivers. No full-time drivers means no full-time benefits. Yeah, they can work for multiple platforms, but then they're going to limit their employment and they're not going to be able to get the benefits anyway. What side am I coming down on, Prop 22 or AB5? That's a great question, because the law is so bad that it forced this hand to move toward Prop 22. I think they should just dissolve AB5 altogether and start from scratch with better law. Wages. The gig companies say Prop 22 will guarantee driver and courier earns at least 120% of minimum wage, which is currently $13, California. That's with companies of 26 employees or more. I think that Uber and Lyft qualify. Opponents say, and we've talked about this, a proposed wage guarantee doesn't mean drivers would earn minimum wage because it's only paid during engaged time. I'm doing a lot of finger quotes today, right? I hate it when people do that. Engaged time. What does engaged time mean? The time that they're actually accepting a ride or have a passenger in the car until they drop them off. That's it. So not only are you not paid for that engaged time, or you only paid for that engaged time, but you're only paid for a percentage of the mileage as well. Only the mileage during that engaged time. We'll get to that in a minute. So that means that, you know, some of you do a little bit of wandering. You're not going to be paid for any of that time or mileage. And sometimes a ride takes you out somewhere and you have to deadhead back. You're not going to be paid for that either. And you're going to say to yourself, well, we're not paid for that now. What do I care? Yeah, but now, if you're working as under a either Prop 22 or AB5, you're either an employee, and they're not going to pay you to deadhead. They're going to figure something else out. They might make you wait until you get another ride. I don't know. Or when you're deadheading back under Prop 22, you're not getting paid because it's not engaged miles. So it's a lose-lose. So then they have a quote by someone named Eden Alva, a Lyft driver in Alameda, and organizers of Gig Workers Rising said his pay has fallen considerably over 6 years. I think we've all recognized that. And I've always said it's because they start tinkering and tinkering and tinkering and tinkering. And when it was based on a percentage, I think that's what the law should say. It would be so simple. Drivers get 80% of the ride minus a modest, reasonable booking fee. That would control everything. Because if Uber and Lyft weren't making enough, they would raise rates. Drivers would get paid more. But once they went through all this nonsense, of course you're getting paid less. And this guy says he might be making an average of $5 an hour. Guess what? No one's holding your feet to a flame. And I know people hate this too because it talks about responsibility. But when you are self-employed, and I've been self-employed most of my life, you have to take some responsibilities. And you have to understand, hey, you know what? Sometimes I'm going to have good weeks, I'm going to have bad weeks. There were times when I was self-employed, and I was self-employed for most of my adult life. I didn't know where my next paycheck was coming from. I certainly didn't expect people that were hiring me, that were contracting me, to cover all that time in between. And, again, I'm not saying drivers should be doing this. I'm just saying you're kind of forcing the hand of either the government or Uber and Lyft now to make drastic changes when I don't know if that's the best position to be in. Gig workers, as contracted employees, you're not going to get an hourly wage. You're going to have good days and bad days, good weeks, bad weeks, good months, bad months. But now we're arguing, well, that's why we're not independent contractors. But this is what you get when you're an employee. I think all they should have done, rather than push the employee standard, was pushed the standard with how we get paid. And I think percentage-based would have been fantastic just for rideshare. I know there's going to be other gigs that wouldn't fit. And that's another problem with AB5. They're making so many exemptions. You have an exemption for hairstylists. You have an exemption for this, for that. And now Uber and Lyft are seeking exemptions. Health benefits and paid leave. Prop 22 provide workers with subsidies for health benefits. And here again, they're doing it based on hours worked. If they work 15 to 25, you get 50% of the average Affordable Care Act contribution. But opponents point out the stipend for health benefits will only be available to drivers who already have a qualifying health care plan. Not only that, but I suspect, I haven't found a place that specifies this yet, but I suspect that is also going to be tied into that engaged time. And if it's tied into engaged time, oh my goodness, trying to get over 25 hours, it's going to, how many hours are you actually driving from the time you accept the ping until the time you drop the passenger off? How much are you actually driving? How much do you actually have to drive for that to accumulate into 40 hours for full time? I think it's crazy. Now, I don't know if that's how it's going to be done, but I suspect so. Otherwise, why would they have brought up that engaged hours, right? So I don't know. I just think it's crazy the way that people interpret this. Prop 22, I think, is a bad counter. Obviously, it was written by people who were biased in favor of rideshare. AB5, I don't know where their bias was. They said that they're trying to protect people. I think they're just trying to get votes. But I just wanted to, there's more here. I think we've got to save this for another video. You guys are going to get tired of hearing me drone on and on and on. So I want to thank you for being here, everybody. As always, I encourage you to like and share the videos. Leave your comments down below on this one. I'm curious what you have to say. Click my face in the corner to subscribe if you haven't already. And don't forget to ring that bell icon. That way you'll know when I post new videos. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'm Mark. This is Mark's Travel Time.